Insider Under the Visor Shooters Podcast. I almost said YouTube Live. My name is Brandon Drum. I'm here with Parker Thune, and it is the off season, but we've been getting kind of creative for y'all. We did the mock class, the predictions for 2025 in February on the last podcast. This podcast, man, we're gonna be all over the place. Basketball. There's some not so good news on the basketball front. And no, I'm not talking about their, 15-point loss to Baylor this past week.
There's not a whole lot of good right now as far as that.
No, well, they won 2 in a row, got back in the top 25, and then got that butt spanked. And then we're going to answer some questions. We got some questions that are on our VIP board, and I want you all to hear these questions. We're going to answer them. I answered quite a few. This is what you get on the VIP side, and we're going to try to let you all see it right here.
Peel back the curtain, as it were, so you can see what all you're missing out on if you're not yet subscribed at ouinsider.com.
And these are the questions we answer on a daily basis for people, and we don't just go in and put like a 2-word sentence. Like, there's paragraphs why such and such, or we'll take that question and make it a note after we do some research on it and go talk to sources. Like, this is what we do. We've done that for you all here for this podcast. We hope you enjoy it. So, but first, Parker, I think you have an ad read.
Yes. Let's pay a bill real quick before we dive in. This episode of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast, folks, is brought to you by Joy Mode. And guys, Joy Mode makes all natural and science-backed supplements dedicated to helping men perform better across their core functions. So if you require the services of the blue pill, Joy Mode is a healthy alternative, but its worth doesn't start and stop there. It also supports cardiovascular health, healthy blood pressure, and athletic performance. Now, it comes in a little packet, just like your typical pre-workout mix or electrolyte powder. All you have to do is mix it into 6 to 8 ounces of water, wait 45 minutes, and watch the magic unfold. Now, here are the game changers. All ingredients have been assessed in peer-reviewed journals, and all ingredients have been studied and researched in humans. You'll never go back to prescription or over-the-counter drugs after trying Joy Mode, which contains clinically supported doses of arginine nitrate, L-citrulline, Panax ginseng, and vitamin C. So, want to see your confidence skyrocket? Go to usejoymode.com for 20% off with code INSIDER. That's 20% off and free shipping with code INSIDER at usejoymode.com. Joy Mode, ingredients with integrity.
There you go. Swing. All right. The best part about this podcast is I'm the 40-year-old. Parker's in his mid-20s, and I'm the immature one all time, every day. And I've got 3 kids, but that's probably why I'm immature, because I'm around an 8 and 11-year-old and a 4-month-old all day. So I tend to dumb my level down to them. Plus, I'm just an immature boob all the time. It is what it is. Though every time, the second you said that, like, all I could think of was Wayne's World and Garth doing Foxy and his little air hump where he's like going after that girl. You probably never seen it. This is before your time. It is what it is. But if you haven't seen Wayne's World, I think you should, because it's a classic. Anyways, all right. Basketball. Porter Moser, Creighton,
man,
knee injuries, tournament, all that good stuff is what we're about to talk about real quickly. First off, like, okay, so he shuts down the DePaul stuff right off the bat,
as you would expect him to.
Yeah. But at that point, it really makes it to where, okay, he's not going to go to DePaul, but he hasn't shut down some of the buzz on Creighton.
Well, because Creighton is not open.
I know, and McDermott is still there. I get it. But there's a lot of buzz that he's going to go take a job elsewhere potentially and or retire, right? Is that kind of what's going on?
But I don't think, if you're in Porter's seat, you don't have to shut down buzz on a job that's not yet open. If at some point, I mean, let's say McDermott gets hired at Ohio State, right? Then obviously given Porter's background, he played at Creighton in the early 90s. He's going to face those questions. And
well, do you think there's something to that? Because before we got off our live on Wednesday, there was a question, and I believe it was from the chef. I can't remember. Um, and he asked, "Do you think that the Ohio State opening will have any bearing on any of the OU basketball staffers?"
it very well could. And I think, for those that are subscribed to OU Insider that have followed our man Brody Lusk's reporting on some of the behind the scenes of the coaching carousel, I think it's easy to figure that the most likely scenario if Porter were to leave Oklahoma would be Greg McDermott leaves Creighton for some other job, right? Ohio State, Arizona State, take your pick. And then Porter Moser becomes the heir apparent at Creighton. And look, I grew up 15 minutes from Creighton's campus, so I'm very well acquainted with that university and its basketball tradition. They've only had 2 head coaches in my entire lifetime, Brandon. Dana Altman was there for 15 years. Greg McDermott has been there for the last 13 years. And so, or 14, I guess now. And so it goes without saying that when you take that job, as long as you're having sustained success, you have a ton of job security. And moreover, one of the things that I think went a little bit underexposed from our interview with Jason Belzer is that one of the things he acknowledged is basketball only schools that don't also have to fund a football program on the NIL side of things actually are getting to the point where in this day and age, in this era, they're going to have comparable, if not substantially larger resources on the basketball side than schools that do also have to fund a competitive football program as far as NIL.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's simple math, right? For a school like Oklahoma, from your NIL pool, you have to pay 85 scholarship guys on the football side and a few incentivized PWOs. And then you also have to pay 13, 15 basketball players.
Yep.
At a school like Creighton, which is a private school, has a lot of wealthy donors, but doesn't sponsor football. When your thing is basketball, when that is really the only thing that your athletic program is known for, and the foundation of your athletic tradition, and all you have to support is 13 to 15 basketball players, you can afford to sink a lot more into those 13 to 15 athletes than a school like Oklahoma can. And so that's where not only Creighton, but DePaul as well. I think that's the reason why so many folks took that report seriously, was because DePaul kind of falls in the same camp. St. Louis, where Moser was an assistant for several years under Rick Majerus, they're expected to have a vacancy at season's end. All of those schools and others.
He wouldn't go back there, would he?
To St. Louis?
Yeah. To me, that's a step. I mean, look, Creighton, I get. DePaul, I get it from a standpoint that Chicago, right? And that's where he's from. He loves the city.
Yeah.
All that good stuff. St. Louis, I do not get that. Like, they haven't been really good or very good in quite some time. And he's gone down that route before.
In the last decade or so, there was a time where they were a regular tournament team. Typically is a pretty high seed.
Right, but you get what I'm saying. They were dominant, though. Like, they were producing NBA dudes back when Majerus was there.
Yeah, but look, I think for Porter, what it's going to be about is less, okay, what are you doing right now? And more about what can you do for me in the long run? How is this athletic department and how is this basketball program aligned to compete? And I think one of the things that is no doubt straining things with Oklahoma a little bit, and I don't know how much, but like we all know, and Porter has said it, he wants a new arena. Jenny Baranchek wants a new arena. And they came to Oklahoma with the understanding and the expectation that a new arena was going to get built. Who knows how long it would take, but that a new arena was going to get built. And here we are 3 years later, after both of them were initially hired, Brandon. And has there been any tangible progress made in that direction? Not really. It's all been theoretical progress.
So on that note, okay, 2 things here real quick.
Okay.
And this is a question that was posed on our board, and I kind of answered it. They thought the question was asked, how much retainability do you think this roster has next year? Because you look at Oklahoma's roster and they return a lot of dudes, and they have a chance to be really, really good next year. Like on paper, they have a chance to be
Correct.
really good, like really, really, really good. Like they're a top 25 team now, having not played together. You get a whole year and a whole off season going into their senior years and junior years, and some of them obviously sophomores. And this roster looks like a top 15 roster in college basketball. NIL, right, is going to come play into that.
Yep.
I'm of the belief that because of the timing of it, it's a perfect number one. They can't. A lot of these guys can't transfer again until after they graduate. Like that's kind of like they can't transfer year after year after year without waivers. And obviously, the NCAA's been giving waivers out, but by rule, you're not supposed to be able to do that over and over and over and over and over. That said, it still is possible.
The
The
game has
NCAA has
changed.
been a
Yes.
pushover. They've been grabbing their ankles for the last decade. So, um, there it is again. Um, at the same time, um, OU's going into a new conference, the SEC. I think even from a donor aspect, not just a university aspect, but from a donor aspect and standpoint, I think across the board in the athletic department, they are not going to want to look vulnerable and not put up a good showing going into there. So I think you're going to see Porter probably has the most leverage he's ever going to have on the NIL front going into the SEC. And he needs to win because if he goes in there and they give him, let's say they give him $3 million for his roster next year, not just to keep, but to add some pieces to make a run and really try to compete with Kentucky and the Floridas and the LSUs and the Auburns of the world and the Tennessees of the world and the SEC, right? Like that's what they want to do. I think Oklahoma's probably going to do that because they don't want to come in looking like they're just football and a couple of other sports. They want their big sports, men's, women's basketball, softball, baseball, to look and compete at a high level.
And I would agree. And kind of, tying a bow on my original flow of thought there. I think if Moser were to leave this offseason, I think it would be for the Creighton vacancy
Mm.
because, look, relative to the other jobs that are going to come open, I think that one situates him very well in the landscape of college basketball as far as having institutional buy-in into the sport. Uh, Creighton has one of the best venues in the country in the CHI Health Center. It's only about 20 years old, large capacity, uh, designed for basketball.
And it's downtown
And,
Omaha too,
and it's downtown. Yep, right across the way from TD Ameritrade Park,
in
or
the
gosh,
river.
what do they call it now? Charles Schwab Field.
It's Charles Schwab Field. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Creighton is all set up very well, just in general from a basketball standpoint, to be able to be nationally competitive. And also, you have the obvious alumni angle to it all. Porter's a Creighton grad, and that takes him a little bit closer back to his
Mm.
recruiting roots in the
I
Midwest.
always
He's got
forget
strong
that.
relationships up there. What's that now?
I always forget that he's a Creighton grad. I
Yeah,
always forget that part.
yeah. And so, look, I don't think it's the right time, at least not yet. And maybe it's a different conversation a month from now, depending on how the season plays out. I don't think it's the right time to go jump at a job like DePaul or St. Louis or even Ohio State, right? But I think Creighton, for a lot of reasons, would be the one job that if I'm an OU fan and that job actually comes open and McDermott bounces, that's what I'm worried about.
Mm-hmm.
But
Some fans are like, no, just go ahead and go because they
oh yeah,
don't
no.
understand how
Like
good a job Moser's actually done
that's a real thought.
with one hand tied behind his back right now.
Yeah. And look, the fact that Oklahoma hasn't made the tournament yet in the 2 going on 3 years that he's been here, and they're going to make the tournament, right? If they don't, that is a catastrophic collapse. If they don't end up making the tournament at this point, okay, now we need to start having some more serious conversations about Porter's job security, because that's just inexcusable for them to tank that hard towards the end of the season. But even so, Brandon, let's say they make the tournament and it's a quick exit. And I'll be honest with you, at this rate, I don't think they're sticking around long.
No,
what is
injured.
the discourse this offseason on Moser if the Sooners go without a tournament berth his first 2 years, then sneak in year 3 but don't do anything?
Okay,
is that
so
good enough?
we?
Have you shown enough progress?
He's
and I'm not necessarily saying shown enough progress to keep your job. Obviously, I think Porter's going to keep. They just extended him last year, right? So he's going to retain his job. The question is he going to be able to walk into the SEC and walk into year 4 with the full support or even the majority support amongst the fan base?
I don't think that matters. I think it's the fact that he's going to have the donors behind him to go get what he needs, because the donors don't want to fail going into the SEC. The athletic department doesn't want to fail going to the SEC. So I think it's irrelevant, to be honest with you. Do you not agree? It is kind of irrelevant because the big money is gonna back him just because, one, he got him into the tournament, and two, I think if you have, it may not be good enough, but if you have any sort of understanding, like not having Suarez and Hughley over the next few weeks, and we don't know the Suarez situation. This is a hypothetical. Nobody's really come out and said one way or the other if he's going to be out for
it's still
a good number.
Fresh.
Yeah, it's still pretty fresh. So I don't expect him to be, if he's available on Saturday versus Kansas, I expect it to be in minimal capacity, and Caden Cooper will probably be the other guy that plays a lot of minutes for them to fill in for Suarez. So I don't. I just think it's irrelevant, and I think if you actually take a step back and you understand the difference between Northweather and Hughley, and now again, Caden Cooper's a freshman, so the difference between Suarez and Caden Cooper may not be on an athletic standpoint very much different, but when you're talking experience and the ability to make plays and the understanding situations, there's a huge gap.
Yeah.
And so if you take a step back and you look at it and be like, okay, they just lost 2 of their better players on their roster. The fact that they went out in the first or second round isn't really that shocking, because in basketball, your top, particularly come tournament time, you're only going to rock 8 guys, 8, 9 guys, right?
Yeah.
Well, you've just cut your top 2 of your top 8, 9 guys. So now you're down to your top 6 plus your back 10 through 12, right? That you've had to move up into that 8, 9 spot. So that kind of sucks for Oklahoma and Moser. So there needs to be some levity there, in my opinion, for fans, and understanding when they were healthy this year, they were really good. It just, as the season wore on, a lot of these guys he brought in came from G5 and below ranks. They were really good at that level, but the physicality of the Big 12 and the SEC was something they've got to get used to. It's like a freshman, right? In football, they always hit that wall at the end of the year, right? Because it's just a grind compared to high school. And so I think that's where you're at with some of these guys. You kind of see it with McCullough, right? Like he went from being super dominant to, the more physical the teams are, the less he produces, in my opinion. And I think next year going to the SEC, one, you're not going to have, the schedule is going to be tough, but it's not the Big 12 in basketball. It's not the Big 12 in basketball. And I think that's, if you have the backing of the donors, I don't know. I think I want to ask you the gym though, dude. Is that thing ever going to get built in your opinion?
Look, this is a whole can of worms, probably something we need an entirely different podcast to completely unpack. But I was actually having this conversation with a member of the university administration last night. We were at dinner together, and one of the things that I mentioned, and we were kind of on the same page with, is if you build that new arena up by the airport, are you getting away from what the identity of your primary audience base needs to be? Because going to the Lloyd Noble Center all the way on the south end of campus, like that's already a pretty prohibitive walk slash drive for many students.
Mm-hmm.
Are students going to show up to watch a game in University North Park? I'm
If there's
kind of
restaurants and bars around, I think they will.
well, and that is true, but even so, that's a long way. And college students are lazy, Brandon. I was a college student a lot more recently than you. I can attest to this.
Very much so.
Most college
Okay.
students are lazy. And so are they going to make the 20-minute drive up to watch that game? I don't think that's something you can count on. And for that reason, I have never liked the idea of an off-campus arena. I don't think it's the shot across the bow that sinks the ship on OU basketball. I think it's I think they'll make it work. But on weeknights and even on weekends, right? Are you going to be able to draw a crowd from the greater Norman and Moore and OKC area to come watch OU basketball games? Or would those people rather allocate the time and money that they're spending to go watch OU basketball to go take their kids to a Thunder game, for instance, right? Especially with the Thunder being really good lately.
Yeah, they're gonna
And
be good for a long
yeah,
time. Probably
on
NBA
the up
title
and
go
up
here
and
soon.
building a foundation, you're almost in competition with the Thunder for eyeballs and butts in seats, you know. And so I have always gravitated more towards the idea of keeping the arena on campus. Obviously, the LNC needs to either get a complete facelift or you just need to build a new one. But I
Or
think
redoing the McCaslin Center. Like,
and
what are we
that's what I've been
doing?
saying. Yeah, that's what I've been saying. Do what Oklahoma State did with Gallagher Iowa. Don't spend $1 billion on a new arena. Sink 60, $70 million into expanding and renovating McCaslin and keep basketball right there in the center of campus where it is highly accessible to your
Two
entire
hundred
student
million
body.
bucks, and you could have an awesome, awesome, awesome arena there.
Yeah,
And
you could.
it doesn't have to be this gargantuan. I think what Lloyd Noble holds about around 11, 12, 13,000 on a standing room only night is perfect. And I don't even think you need that. I think 8,500 to 10,500 would be a fantastic arena. And there's enough room there to make that happen. I
Yeah.
don't understand. The students only have to walk 2 blocks. Some of them, it's right next to their apartment. A lot of them. There's so
Yeah.
many apartment complexes right there around those parking lots that there's a parking lot. There's parking lots right there. There's parking lots. There's parking garages. Like all of it can work. You can start letting people park in the and tailgate before the games in the yards of the students at their homes and stuff like you do before a football game. Like so many things can be done to make the atmosphere for basketball reach a level that has not been reached ever at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
There's like my brain is just like turning right now. And for some people are like, oh, finally, Drum. I get it. I get it. I'm not very smart. But in this situation, I feel like I'm really smart. Like you're throwing,
Yeah.
and guess what? It's a stone throws away from Campus Corner.
Yep.
That's where all the bars and restaurants are.
Yep. Get
You don't
done
have to
watching
build
the
a bunch of new
game.
ones. They're right
Walk
there,
over to
and they're
Campus Corner.
redoing Campus Corner where they're going to have everything on the bottom of the all the retail and restaurants on the bottom floors, and on the top floors they're going to build condos and stuff on top of the building. They're in the midst of redoing all of Campus Corner to make it even better. What are we doing, Josiah? I know you're watching. Come on, man. What are we doing here, man? What are we doing?
Okay. There you go.
Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. Again, I think it has always made the most sense to keep basketball on campus and to keep basketball in the as close to the center of campus as possible. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yes, I love the idea of facelifting McCasland. People more intelligent and architecturally inclined than I would have to share some details on how feasible it is to expand it to a
Oh,
reasonable
there's the issue.
capacity. Yeah. I mean, you
So
may
can you beat Kansas?
this weekend?
Mm-hmm.
No. I mean, I guess theoretically, like there's a world in which that happens, but
That was almost like a hell
like,
no.
like you're relying on Sam Godwin and Luke Northweather
Oh
to
my
go toe to
God.
toe in the paint with Hunter Dickinson. I'm sorry, that's just not happening. Like you're gonna have to shoot the lights out and
Tanner
then
Groves
some.
Jr., baby.
You are gonna have to shoot the lights out if you want to win that game against Kansas. I guess theoretically there's a path for Oklahoma to win the game, and I'm not counting on it, Brandon. I don't know how you can. Kansas beat Oklahoma in Allen Fieldhouse, which, okay, they always beat Oklahoma in Allen Fieldhouse. But I think what that game underscored is that even when John Hughley is healthy, and obviously he is not right now and will not play.
But he was in foul trouble that whole game. I do remember that.
But even when John Hughley is healthy, the Sooners don't really have anybody that can go toe to toe down low with Hunter Dickinson. And
fair.
Now that Hughley is going to be, and you saw what happened deeper into that game as Hughley got into foul trouble, right? And you had to lean more on Sam Godwin. That's where Dickinson started to heat up and things started to open up for him in terms of scoring. And so,
what are you saying?
I'm saying Sam Godwin is not.
He's a walk on. He was a walk on for a reason.
I'm saying he's not on Hunter Dickinson's level. There's no shame in that, right? Sam Godwin's a pretty good basketball player, but he's not Hunter Dickinson. And I think what
he's
you have
seen. He's on my Groves list, bro.
Oh man,
he's on my Tanner Groves list. Like I've been out for Sam Godwin over the last like 7 games. Like I've been tweeting just how much he annoys me. You play 4-on-5 on offense with him out there. 4-on-5. He's just out there running around, screening people. The second he gets the ball, everybody backs off and just kind of looks at him like, you suck. I'm not even going to play defense on you. I'm going to go double this guy. The lane's wide open here. Oh, shocker. You tried to pass it up anyways and go lay the ball up.
Yeah, so if you want to win that game at the LNC tomorrow, what you're going to have to do is just lean into the small ball. Like that, you're just going to have to embrace that being your identity and hope it works. Because
and I hate saying a player stinks, by the way. I really do. Because I know they work hard, but he's not. He's been abused in the Big 12 play. Am I wrong?
No.
He was really good. He was leading. Oh man, we were touting how good he was, how much he improved.
I know non-con he looked great.
Oh.
It's the Marcus Major effect.
Oh yeah, it looks great. Non-con
disappears in conference play.
The non-con superhero. All right. So I actually think Oklahoma has a chance to win tomorrow because I think number one, aren't they honoring Billy Tubbs? Is that what's going on?
They are honoring Billy Tubbs. Yes.
I think the atmosphere will be kind of cool then. Yeah. Though I think that the game that's going to be the coolest, and I want to go to it so badly, is Houston. One, because I want to see my boy Kellen. I haven't seen him in several years. But two, Kelvin, man, having him come back is just going to be crazy because he's never come back. And the Big 12 did it right by having him come back to the LNC before Oklahoma leaves. Like that was the right thing to do. And because I think he's never really got he's been honored, right? He's been honored. His teams have been honored. But I think the way Oklahoma is going to honor him when he comes back for that game against Houston, when he plays Houston here this next week, I think is going to be at a level that he's actually going to feel at peace with the way things were left at Oklahoma. You feel what I'm saying? Like, because there has been some where there was some feeling towards that for quite some time because one, the fans didn't want him to leave, but he quote texted too much, right? And had been warned and all that type of stuff. And the NCAA came after him, and that's kind of where
He was
he
just
left
ahead
for
of his
Indiana.
time.
Huh?
He was just ahead of his time.
He was ahead of his time very much, and he had the number one recruiting class for a reason. So, and ironically, that recruiting class had players that won national titles on it at other places, and were like Scotty Reynolds was in that. Like,
Oh man, I forgot
they
about
would have
that.
had Scotty Reynolds, Blake Griffin, Damian James, Taylor Griffin, Austin Johnson, Tony Crocker on the same team.
Scotty Reynolds, man.
Think about that lineup I just named back in the day. That was legit.
One of my very like one of the NCAA March Madness moments that seared into my brain is Scotty Reynolds going coast to coast to beat Pitt, send Nova to the Final Four. I think that was 2009.
Yep. Which would have been the year after Blake left because he was 08. So, well, he was 08, 09. So I guess it probably was 2009 when that happened. I was actually at the game when in Memphis when OU played North Carolina and that roster with Hansborough and oh my God, they had like the whole lineup was in the NBA forever.
Yeah, they were a
So
buzzsaw.
and OU was the only team that played them within single digits the whole NCAA tournament. How about that? 9 points. Everybody else was a double digit loser. So that shows you how good that OU team was. And guess who built that team? That was Kelvin Sampson's squad outside of Willie Warren. It was all Kelvin Sampson. So, anyways, well, and what was the other dude that played for him? What he started with a P. I think it was like French. You know what I'm talking about? The athletic kid. Like he just dunked. He was awesome.
I don't recall.
Doesn't matter.
Young.
Anyways,
mailbag time.
yes, let's do that real quickly.
Again, folks, we're going to answer a couple of these questions for you on the podcast. But
so this is from a mailbag that I answered. I probably got about 15, 16 of these answered over the last 48 hours. And there was like 30 something. So we're going to answer them here, the ones that I couldn't get answered, because usually you've got to be pretty long winded in these mailbags. So do you see Caden Helms getting some playing time this year after everything that he's been through? And that is from Nico Z23. Thank you, Nico Z23, for asking that question.
Do you want me to answer it?
Yeah, Caden Helms is your Nebraska boy. I always let you go first.
Yeah, I think he factors in. Absolutely. And tight end is pretty wide open to me going into the spring. You know, the Sooners brought in Bauer Sharp. They added Devon Mitchell. You have Cade McIntyre coming back. You obviously have Caden Helms coming back. And I think all four of those guys, am I forgetting anybody? Is there anybody I'm leaving out? I guess
Okay.
Josh Fanuel, but he's a walk-on. So
Yeah, but I think he's going to actually play because he started to play more and more and more as the season went on. They love him. He's a freak, really good basketball player, turned football. And how many times have we seen that one play out?
Yeah.
Former basketball player, now playing tight end, has made it to the league or has become an All-American or whatever. I mean, the best tight end in the NFL.
Yeah, that is true. But Fanuel is actually smaller than a lot of the other guys in the tight end room at Oklahoma. He's only 6'3", which I think McIntyre's 6'3" as well, but everybody else is north of 6'4". Caden Helms is 6'5", and so
is he really?
I think
Wow.
What he's going to have to leverage in order to earn a consistent role in this offense is that combination of length and speed, right? Because it has been a minute since the Sooners had a threat at the tight end position that was, well, fast, right? And even Braden Willis, right? When he was at the top of his game in Norman, and he was one of the Sooners' cornerstone offensive guys in the 2022 cycle, he wasn't going to run away from anybody. In fact, you can recall him getting run down in that TCU game. Had a 70-something yard reception. They ran him down at the 2-yard line. And Caden Helms, more so than anybody else in Oklahoma's tight end room, has that capacity where he can run away from you. And I look, I'll be honest, nobody knows what he's going to look like when the pads come back on, because we haven't seen him in almost a full year at this point. He hasn't been healthy in almost a full year at this point. But if the Caden Helms that comes back for spring ball this year is anything close to the Caden Helms that we saw, that we got glimpses of before the injury, then yes, I think he does absolutely have a rotational role on this team. And I think it is worth noting that the only reason he didn't factor in more prominently as a freshman was because he wasn't big enough. He was more of a wide receiver than a tight end.
Yeah,
at that point.
He's big now. He's like real big now.
I mean, shoot, you're sidelined for that long, you're going to get bigger, right? You're going to add muscle mass because you got to live in the weight room and you got to do what you can to stay physically ready for when your time comes and when you're 100% cleared. So I think Helms is really intriguing going into 2024 and somebody that could come out of relative obscurity. And I say relative obscurity not because he wasn't a blue chip guy or not because he wasn't highly regarded. Obviously he was, but it seems like he's almost been forgotten about. And I think that's somewhat natural because of the injury, but he is a guy that I very much expect to be in contention for snaps at the tight end position in 2024, a position at that where you don't necessarily have a clear front runner for the starting job right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think Nate Roberts will probably end up starting there.
Jake Roberts.
Jake Robertson. Well, Nate. I think Nate will at some point in his career too if he chooses Oklahoma. How about that for a bold prediction?
I completely missed Jake Roberts in that whole conversation.
Yeah, and you asked me, but I thought you named Jake, to be honest. I could have swore you said Jake Roberts right off the bat. So I didn't. I thought you were like, did I miss somebody? And then you said Fanuli, but then I'm with you on obviously Caden Helms. I think just because I feel like a healthy Caden Helms provides such a mismatch problem for linebackers, because if he can be even remotely as close to as explosive as he was prior to his injury, I think it's going to be really hard for anybody to cover him. Safety, linebacker, his size. I mean, he's up to what, 230 something pounds now. So like he's a big dude. I think if he can ever get up to that 245,
and I think he'll be there.
Yeah, I think that's where that's going to be that marker where he's going to be, I think, a potential all-conference type of talent. That's if he comes back again the way he was before his injury. And we're going to know that. I don't know that we'll see that in the spring, because it generally you see the 100% of it, how everything works after the year marker, and that's not till what, June. So I think that's probably where you'll see fall camp is where we're going to know how is that going to work for him moving forward. But I think he's going to play. I agree with Parker, and I think he'll contribute in a good way as well. All right, this is an interesting question, Parker, and I'm going to let you answer it because that's your area.
Okay, here we go.
I'm going to steer clear of this one. I'll answer the second part, but the first question, I'm going to let you go. This is by Matt DJ 2002. So thank you for asking this question, Matt. How has the past year impacted relationships with the LSN program? That's number one. And what was the top 3 pieces of information this cycle you were told in confidence that was the hardest not to reveal publicly?
Well, gosh, I think for obvious reasons, Matt, I don't even feel like I can answer question number 2, because if we're told not to disclose something publicly, well, out of
Well,
respect
that's
to our
where the
tradition.
tell-all comes in. I always just throw stuff out there, but I'll go ahead. Go
Well,
ahead. I'll
yeah, I
answer
mean,
that second part.
if there's no potential backlash in revealing that information, obviously, but there's obviously stuff that we're told in this profession
Yeah.
that never sees the light of day. But as far as LSN is in reference, obviously, to Lee Summit North High School up in Lee Summit, Missouri, down on the south side of the KC Metroplex. And the past year, as far as relationships there, look, obviously the bridge is pretty much burned with Caden Green and his family, the way that all went down. I mean, still just shocking to me how that all turned sour and how quickly it all turned sour. I think it's pretty evident what happened with the Winery family, right? And that recruitment. As far as relationships elsewhere with, Kamari Moore, who is still solidly committed to Oklahoma, and Isaiah Mosey, whom Emmett Jones and Oklahoma are still actively recruiting, those relationships aren't damaged. I think OU sees those individual situations with Green and Winery for what they are, right? And understands that I know there are some fans that just want to torch every single bridge to Lee Summit North and never touch that program again. That's a little bit draconian. And again, the OU staff, this is one of the areas in which you just trust that they know more and they're better equipped to handle the situation than anybody that's looking at it from a third party perspective. So the Sooners still maintain Kamari Moore's commitment. I think he's severely underrated. Somebody that's going to be a big time performer for Oklahoma if and when he makes it on campus in Norman. And I have faded on the idea of Isaiah Mosey ending up in the class, but I think that has less to do with any sort of awkwardness in the relationships there and more to do with the fact that Dan Lanning has been around Isaiah Mosey literally his entire life. Was a high school assistant in the KC area when Isaiah was growing up. And so and I remember Isaiah's dad, Jamar, telling me this. Isaiah's relationship with Dan Lanning goes back to when he was like 3 or 4 years old. I mean, it has been that relationship is very, very solid, I guess is what I'm saying. And so, yeah, Oklahoma is, and well, maybe the better term was Isaiah's dream school, but I think as he's endured the recruiting process, he's come to understand that just because he grew up rooting for Oklahoma doesn't mean that's the only spot he should consider, and that's where he should commit without giving anybody else a second thought. And as he's continued to take trips up to Oregon, he's really warmed to it. And as of right now, I think Oregon is best positioned to land his commitment. And we were talking about this on the live the other night. I think I actually talked about this on the Locked On Sooners podcast with John and Josh as well, but that's okay as far as Emmett Jones is concerned, right? Because all the guys he offers, he understands what the recruiting game's like. That's a world in which he's existed for upwards of a quarter century now. So he understands the game. And if Isaiah Mosey wants to go to Oregon, well, guess what? Emmett's going to be just as content taking Manny Choice or Andrew Marsh or Jacaden Ferguson or maybe in a perfect world, Caleb Cunningham. But all in all, any and all of the guys on Emmett's offer sheet, any of the guys that he is pursuing, he's willing to take a commitment from at any time.
There you go. And I'll answer that second question real quick, because I got some stuff. How about this? The Zadavian Sim stuff. I hinted towards it last week in the live, and I even answered it on one of our mailbag questions on OU Insider. So I'm giving y'all, peeling back a curtain a little bit publicly for you guys. Shortly after, and I won't say shortly, it was several weeks after the whole Zadavian Sims thing went down. Some communications, and it wasn't with Todd Bates, it wasn't with Chavis, it wasn't with Venables. but some communication was made on the OU side of things with Zadavian Sims people and his trainer and everything. And there were some talks of them coming up to Norman and kind of hashing it out and maybe even getting Oklahoma not so much even back into the picture, but maybe even getting Oklahoma a flip if things get kind of firing out. Because when a kid commits to a school that is 2,000 miles away, there's going to be some hesitation after it because reality starts to set in a little bit, right? Like, holy crap, I'm leaving and I'm going to be 2,000 miles away from everybody that I've grown up with and loved. So there was some of that in it. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma kind of decided, you know what? We're in a really good shape with Jaden Jackson. We're in a really good shape with Nigel Smith, David Stone. And at that point in time, um, who was some of who the Georgia who went to Georgia? What was his name?
Joseph Jonah Ajonye.
Joseph Jonah and Jonah, and obviously Dominic McKinley. All those guys were still in play for Oklahoma, and they were in really good shape with them. So they felt like, well, they're going to end up with one or two or three of those guys, which they did. They ended up with three of them, and so they thought we're in such good shape. There's no reason to go back after all that drama to make amends. And look, when I say make amends, publicly come out and start recruiting the kid again. And the kid, everything that was said on both sides just kind of be done with and continue moving forward with the relationship. And, Sims's people thought that Oregon probably ended up being the best fit for him. And Oklahoma feels like they got what they wanted at the end of the day. So everybody's happy. And the kid's going to go and he's going to be a good player at Oregon. And I think everybody should understand that. That's where his heart was. That's where he ended up. He's very happy about it. Oklahoma's happy about what they got. It worked out great. Was it dramatic between then and now? Oh, yeah. But it ended up great. And everybody's kind of let bygones be bygones. Oklahoma is back talking with C4. Um, everything's good. Everything's good. So there's that. Trying to think of another one. Xavier Robinson. and the whole, and I wrote about this on the mailbag too. The whole tweets, all the tweets that he had that were really cryptic, and it looked like things were going in the opposite direction after he committed to Oklahoma. And it was right after everybody started getting their official offer in the mail. He didn't get his. And he didn't get his for a while because of a mail mishap. They mailed it to his dad's former place of living. And his dad had moved. He lives down the street from me in Mustang, and he stays at both spots while the season's going on, right? His dad's in Del City, Midwest City area. His mom lives here in Mustang. Literally, I can see her house right out this window to my right. And so it went to the old place. They finally found it. All was good. But the weird part is it took several days, and it was to the point where there was some issues going on behind the scenes there, but everything was ironed out. They found it. Everything was good. So, I mean, those are two things that I guess I never really publicly stated. I said I would tell you guys after signing day what happened with Zadavian Sims, and there it is. All right, one more really good question. Let's find one that's really, really good, dude. Ooh, this is a good one.
Okay.
In the water. Really good question here. How close to committing to OU did the two recruits of Bryant Wesco and Sammy Brown get? And also, we always knew Sammy was a long shot, but he seemed to really feel at home at OU per all the reports. With Wesco, one day it seemed like OU was a sure thing. The next thing he's at Clemson. It was close. Oklahoma led for both, not both. Oklahoma led for Bryant Wesco for a long time. His
Yep.
sister played soccer. The second his sister transferred and the whole soccer situation took place, it kind of pulled the rug out from home a little bit. So
Yeah,
all the
that was
leverage
tough.
that they had, and obviously he had family ties, right, in other situations, but he went to Oregon. He absolutely loved it and shocked the crap out of everybody when he committed.
You
But
mean you
he
mean
held
Clemson?
Clemson. That's what I meant. Clemson. Yeah, he went to Clemson. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Um, hey, there was a time where things kind of opened back up behind the scenes too, wasn't there? Between Wesco and
There
the Jones.
was, and it was during the season when
Mm,
Clemson kind of scuffled, but the Tigers were able to shut things back down pretty quickly.
okay.
There definitely was a point, and I I guess we may have reported on it a little bit. We never got too deep into the weeds on it.
Mm,
That would have been around September or October, where yes, there was a lot of buzz behind the scenes that Wesco was going to reopen his recruitment. That never happened, at least not publicly. And he stayed locked in with Clemson and ultimately signed there. But yeah, that was, recruiting will throw you a curveball every now and again. I can't say it enough. And we got some big curveballs this past cycle
yeah.
from Wesco picking Clemson off that one visit to Peyton Pierce picking Ohio State off of one
Oh
visit.
yeah.
Um,
Xavier Filsaime not having OU in the top five after they led for such a long time,
yeah, well, at that
going to
point, I think
Florida.
they were gonna,
NIL.
yes. And then of course everything that happened with the Williams Winery process. But yeah, that to me is one of the best reasons why it is advised that you sign up for OU Insider, because recruiting is fun. Recruiting is a roller coaster. Even when it doesn't all fall your way, man, it is tremendously fun chaos to follow for the most part. There are about
Okay.
10 or 12 days a year where I'm like, shoot me in the face.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
other than that, man, it is a roller coaster.
Very much so. Okay, one more, because this is so good, and I missed it when I was answering questions that I think it would just be wrong if we didn't answer these two right here from Hunter Phillips. This is really good. Top three players that will outperform the recruiting ranking in the 2024 class, and top three portal impacts from the 2024 class. Okay, outperform. This one's easy for me.
Okay.
Easy, easy, easy. After this telemarketer gets them calling me, um, let me pull up just so I make sure that I get this correctly here. Let's do this. All right, I'm pulling up the commits here. Okay. Outperform the rankings. I'm going to say Daniel Akinkumi, number one, which I don't really feel like that is a shocker.
Not a hot take.
Not a hot take at all. I'm going to say Andy Bass, number two. Again, not a hot take. And the other one, I think is going to be a hot take. And this
Let,
is crazy.
let's hear it.
David Stone. He's the number one overall defensive lineman, so it's really hard to outperform that. But he's the number five overall player on Rivals. He's number 10 or 12, or he's number 21, 29 on three. So he's going to outperform that. I promise you. I think the dude is going to end up being all SEC his sophomore season. As a junior, he's an All American and he's a top 10 pick. That is my prediction.
Wow. But then it begs the question, if he's a top 10 pick, did he outperform the recruiting ranking?
I think so because cumulatively, I think he's 10 or 12th. Like, so if we just want to go off Rivals, no, but I'm
Okay.
going off of cumulative.
Okay.
So yeah, I think he outperforms his ranking. If he's like 12th, then if he's a top 10 pick, yes, he outperformed his ranking.
All right, Portal, go for it.
Um, ooh, good portal picks. Gosh, that outperform. That is a great question. Um, gosh, dang. Portal. I will say top 3 portal gets is Caden Woolard, Fabici Nwewu, and Garen Hatchett. And I know I didn't throw Deion Burks in there, but I didn't throw him in there because there's so many good wide receivers at Oklahoma, and I think Nick Anderson's going to be an all SEC guy next year. So,
For me, the portal guys that I think make the biggest impact, I agree with you on Woolard, certainly. And I will say Deion Burks is number 2. Number 3 for me, yeah, I would also have to go Fabechi Nwawu. Because I think and right, like for any offensive lineman, their impact on the game is more difficult to measure, or at least more difficult to see with the naked eye. But I think he's somebody that's going to be a wall at that guard position for Oklahoma. And I trust that he's going to hold down the fort. So those are my 3 from the portal. As far as the 3 recruits that outperform their recruiting ranking, Akin Kunmi is one that I certainly agree on. And I'm going into the secondary with the other 2. I think Reggie Powers is going to outperform his ranking. I think Reggie Powers
I saw
is going to be
4-star, and that's why I didn't do that.
At the University of Oklahoma. And he was a 4-star, but he was a non-top 250 4-star. So
you're going to say Boganowski, the other one, right?
No, not Boganowski. Not Boganowski. Eli Bowen.
Ooh, that's a good one.
For the life of me, I cannot understand, because Boganowski was a guy that towards the end of the cycle, his stock was rising, right? Everybody across the industry was collectively coming to the understanding, okay, like this guy's better than we realized. With Eli Bowen, it was the opposite effect. And I don't understand that, because, I was talking to a source down in Dallas about Eli Bowen last week. And that source was going, man, how on earth is everybody so low on Eli Bowen? How on earth are there people that legitimately only think this kid has a scholarship to OU because of who his older brother is? Eli Bowen, folks, has the school record for single season interceptions at Denton Guyer High School, and he said it as a sophomore. He picked off 10 passes as a sophomore. One thing I've heard from multiple folks who have seen a lot more of Eli Bowen than I have and are more qualified to make this judgment is his ball skills are better than Peyton's. Is he quite as fast, quite as elusive as a ball carrier? Maybe not, but that's not what he needs to be. Right? He's a defensive back. And so I think by the end of it all, both of the Bowen brothers, it's not going to be a situation where you remember Peyton as an OU grade and then, also he had a younger brother, right? It's not the, well, I get Taylor was older, but it's not the Blake Griffin, Taylor Griffin type of dynamic. I think both of those dudes are going to be remembered as premier football players at the University of Oklahoma. And I think Eli is somebody that does see the field in year 1. In what capacity? I don't know. It may depend on injuries, may depend on a lot of things. But do not disregard or discount Eli Bowen or simply try to explain his presence away as, okay, well, he's the little brother. Of course, he got a scholarship. Of course, he's on the roster. Don't really expect him to ever do anything. I think Eli Bowen is going to make a major impact for the Sooners before his career in Norman is over.
I agree. I think my 4th one would be Boganowski, because I think that he never made it into the top 250. And I think that was just such a travesty that,
man,
it's crazy.
Didn't he? Like, he
no,
was
it's crazy. So I think he is going to be above, and he's going to be a day 2 type pick when it's all said and done. That's my opinion, though.
He was always a guy where every single time we would have a rankings update and we'd send in our evals.
Yep.
I'd always send in an eval of Boganowski and say, hey, this guy's a top 250 dude.
Me too. Never worked.
Never worked. But
all right. That's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. If you're not at OU Insider, go subscribe now. $9.95 a month, or $99.95 will get you all the way through the first SEC season. both national signing days and all the junior days up to dead period in February right now through 2025. It's perfect. You get all the official visits, you get everything if you go sign up right now for a whole year. And you get to ask Parker and I. These are the type of questions we answer. We do team stuff all the time. People ask us what's going on behind the scenes with the team. Yeah, we talk about it here sometimes on the podcast, but we go into deep detail on OU Insider. If you want to know who's standing out, like right here, right now, we've already had multiple times. We've updated stuff. I've updated stuff. Actually, a really cool note on Boganowski and what's going on with him on OU Insider VIP. It's worth it. There's players' parents on our board that talk about what's going on all the time. They tell you what's happening during the recruiting process, all kinds of stuff go on our message board that you don't get anywhere else. You won't get that on Twitter. You won't get that anywhere else. It's on OU Insider VIP. So try us, $9.95 a month, $99.95 for a whole year. If you're not subscribed here, you want basketball, football, recruiting, softball, baseball, whatever, and it has to do with the University of Oklahoma. And we're even talking about a little bit, thinking about doing a Thunder podcast for you guys because we know there's so many Thunder fans that are Oklahoma
bandwagon fans. I'm just messing with you.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare. You know I'm not bandwagon.
Oh, now they're good. So now Brandon wants to talk about the Thunder.
Oh my gosh. I would talk Jesse and I would talk about him all day, every day. Don't you get me started right now. All right. He likes doing this because he's not an NBA guy. But we know who you guys are. So if you do, we're going to read the comments. If that's something you would be interested in, is a Thunder podcast with Jesse, myself, and maybe Brody Lusk, the guys that actually follow it every day, comment. And we will see if we can't start something like that here in the near future. Because we're trying to find ways to be diverse for you guys. Talk about a multitude of things. But 99.999% of the time, it's going to be University of Oklahoma football, recruiting, basketball, recruiting, baseball, recruiting, softball, recruiting, all that. And by the way, the softball team started off hot down there in Mexico. So that's good. Still number one in the country, still on that streak. So we're going to be talking about all that this offseason during football. Spring football's rolling around. You want to be a part of that, subscribe here to this channel. Subscribe to OU Insider VIP. All right, that's going to do it for Parker Thune. My name is Brandon Drum. You guys have a blessed day.